Hello and welcome to our AWS migration series. In this section, we will talk about AWS networking. I cannot stress this enough. This is the foundational knowledge that your team will ever have about anything about AWS. So let's get started. So why networking in cloud? AWS networking is the how, not the what. We need network security protection for on-premise application. We will need the same in public cloud as well. This statement is true whatever, whether you are using AWS or whether you are using Azure or Google. You need definitely, maybe more so, you need cloud security, separation from one account to another. AWS VPC or virtual private cloud provides multi-availability zone networking in a single region. Default VPC, every account gets its own default VPC now after 2013. However, creating new VPC for new application is the norm. Why? Because the default VPC comes with a default network setting, route tables. When you create your own VPC, you can set up everything from scratch. That is why. So this is the diagram I have taken from AWS documentation. A VPC can contain several subnets, and normally it does contain several subnets. Access is controlled by route tables. You can see on the right side there are route tables. Each route table has two entries. First the destination CID or IP address, and then on the right side the target, right? So on the left side you can see that there are two subnets we are showing here. The first subnet is the public subnet. We normally place web servers or applications that are connected to the internet, and in the private subnet we normally place database server or NoSQL database server. Those should not be accessed by the public internet. Each subnet is attached to a router, as you can see in between, and then there is another object, AWS object called Internet Gateway. If the Internet Gateway is attached to the route table of a subnet, then we call it public subnet, otherwise private subnet. As you can see, if you move on the right side, you see the first route table. The second row is attached to the IGW, which is Internet Gateway, and then this one is the public subnet. The next one is not attached to the Internet Gateway, so internet traffic cannot directly come and go from hosts in the private subnet. But what happens if our database server software needs patches from the internet? Then we will use a NAT gateway. We'll talk about NAT gateway in a little bit, but let's move on now. Now, software defined network boundaries driven by massive virtualization. So in the on-prem, you might have physical network boundaries, but in AWS, in other clouds, driven by massive virtualization, all cloud providers, including AWS, uses software to implement network boundaries, right? So you and me, if we are AWS customers, we might be using the same network cards. It's not divided by hardware, but AWS has written software so that your traffic will be separated from my traffic. Boundaries separating each customer sharing the same physical network. Can span multiple availability zones. Each VPC can span multiple AWS availability zones but cannot span across AWS regions. Multiple subnet. Each VPC can have multiple subnet, as we talked about earlier. That is where the thoughtful use of CIDR comes into play. Okay. Route table. Each subnet within a VPC has a route table associated with it. The route table has one or more rules guiding the network traffic into and out of the subnet. So route table is one AWS object that we will create. Internet Gateway is another AWS object or service enabling AWS virtual machines connect to the internet and internet traffic going into the VMs. Public subnets, as we already talked about, subnets within an AWS VPC are called public subnets if they have a rule linking them to the Internet Gateway. hosts in the public subnet. People normally install publicly accessible web servers or application servers in the public subnet. Private subnets that do not have a rule in their route table linking them to the internet gateway are called private subnets. Hosts in the private subnet, as we already talked about, people normally install databases, other parts of the applications that you do not want public traffic to come into should not be accessible directly into the internet, right? So let's see. However, even hosts such as database servers, as we talked about, needs patches from the internet to be installed regularly. NAT instance, you have two choices here, or NAT Gateway. We can create our own custom single multiple NAT instance and link them to the private subnet route table. AWS has realized how common our private subnet host will require patches from the internet or internet connectivity. So AWS does offer a managed AWS NAT Gateway service, and my suggestion is you try that. This is a lot cheaper than hosting your NAT instance in an EC2 instance. So if it meets your availability and security requirement, definitely use AWS managed NAT Gateway service. Network Access Control List, or NACL. Each subnet also has a security layer called NACL, which is Network Access Control List, which controls traffic that are allowed, denied to and from the subnet. There are other security measures that we'll talk about when we discuss EC2 instances, but this is a security layer at the subnet level, right? So again, I kept this for you guys to take a look. We discussed this. We defined each and every component of the AWS that makes the AWS networking work, and then keep this picture in mind, definitely. Understanding network is your foundation. Without having a complete command of AWS networking, you will not make solid progress. So my stress is make sure you can create the network either through scripting, which is CloudFormation, or through AWS CLI, or at least you are clear when you are creating the network through the AWS Management Console. We can create all the AWS networking objects such as VPC, subnets, route tables, internet gateway through the AWS Management Console, also through CLI and CloudFormation, as we already talked about. Command line interface, which is a Python-based command line interface, and a JSON YML-based scripting tool called CloudFormation. Both of these also can automate VPC creation. So with this, as I said, this is a tricky subject. Let me know if you have any questions, comments. I would try to answer as soon as possible. And if you really are liking the series, subscribe. Then whenever I add video, you will get notified. Thanks for listening. I will take your leave now, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.